The alarm on my console screamed, before I even understood what it was screaming about. My name is Iran Vosk, Senior Archivist of the Coalition Survey Vessel Quiet Ledger, and in that moment, every year of my training meant nothing, because the dead ship in front of us had just turned its lights on. We had traveled 4 months through empty space to reach this forgotten system, chasing a story most of my colleagues thought was a joke. The ship that shouldn't be. A derelict vessel, drifting alone at the edge of a quarantine system, its metal older than any recorded civilization in Coalition history. I came expecting silence. I came expecting dust and bones and old data logs. I did not expect the hull to hum. Captain Dara Finch stood beside me, her hands frozen over the controls. "Power signature just spiked," she said. "That thing has been sitting here for centuries. It should not have power." "Nothing about this ship should exist," I answered. "Let us not start being surprised now." We moved closer. The planet behind the derelict pulsed on our scanners like an open wound, colored the deep red that our systems reserve for the worst possible rating a world can receive. Class 15. In all of Coalition history, no sapient species had ever been confirmed to survive birth on a Class 15 world, let alone build a civilization there. The pressure alone could fold a Coalition hull like paper. The atmosphere was listed as actively corrosive. The surface temperature swings were violent enough to crack solid rock apart in a single day. And yet, here was a ship, older than our oldest myths, sitting quietly in orbit above it, waiting. We boarded with 4 crew members. Martin Cole led the team, a broad, careful engineer who had spent his whole career studying wreck sites. Behind him came Elena Voss, our linguist, and 2 junior officers, whose names I will not bother you with, since they mostly stayed near the door with their weapons raised, waiting for something that never came. The interior of the ship was not what a tomb should look like. Tombs are still. This place breathed. Lights flickered on ahead of us as we walked, section by section, like the ship itself was waking up to greet visitors it had been expecting for a very long time. "Life support is active," Martin said, checking his scanner in disbelief. "Not strong, barely a whisper, but active." Elena found the first wall marking near what looked like a crew chamber. She spent almost an hour with her translation device before she looked up at me, her face pale under the emergency lighting. "This is not a warning," she said. "This is a supply manifest, and a duty roster." I stepped closer to read it myself, though I could not understand the symbols without her help. "A duty roster means crew," I said slowly. "Crew means this was not a tomb. This was a working ship." "Was," Martin repeated, staring at the flickering lights above us. "I am not sure it stopped working." We continued deeper, moving past storage bays filled with tools that made no sense to our engineers, past sleeping chambers, with soft fabric still intact after all this time. Then we found the stasis pods. Inside them were bodies, preserved and calm, belonging to a species none of us had ever seen in any database. They were soft-bodied, no natural armor, no claws built for tearing, no obvious defenses that I could identify. By every measurement Coalition science uses to predict survival, these creatures should not have lasted a single generation anywhere dangerous, let alone on a world rated Class 15. Elena found the ship's registry a moment later, and her voice shook slightly when she read it aloud. "Origin world," she said. "Coordinates match the planet below us." Nobody spoke for several seconds. "That is not possible," said one of the junior officers. "Nothing survives on a Class 15 world. Nothing evolves there. It is not a place a species escapes to. It is a death sentence." "Unless," I said quietly, feeling something cold settle into my chest, "it is not a death sentence to them, unless it is simply home." Captain Finch's voice came sharp through our comms from the ship. "You need to see the new scan results. Now." We hurried back toward the boarding hatch, and by the time we returned to the quiet ledger, the bridge screens were already filled with data that should not exist. Our sensors, after finally penetrating the storm layer that had kept the planet hidden for centuries, were picking up structured electromagnetic emissions, agricultural heat patterns, orbital debris arranged with obvious intention, not chaos, something we had cataloged for generations as a natural ring formation, never once suspecting it was industrial. "That is not a dead world," Finch said, her voice flat with disbelief. "That is a populated one." A moment later, our communication array picked up a transmission from the surface. It was not a distress signal. It was not a warning. It was, astonishingly, a greeting, delivered in a tone so casual it took our translation systems a moment to process it correctly. "Oh, you found the old seed ship," the voice said, warm and unbothered, coming through with a slight accent. Elena identified as regional rather than universal. "Sorry about the silence. That sector does not get much traffic anymore. Welcome. Mind the weather. It will try to kill you. Honestly, it tries to kill us too." Nobody on the bridge said a word for a long time. Finch finally responded, keeping her voice steady. "This is Captain Dara Finch, of the Coalition vessel Quiet Ledger. We request permission to open direct contact with your government." The reply came fast, almost cheerful. "Sure thing. I will patch you through to Daniel. He handles first contact stuff. Try not to worry too much. Everyone panics a little at first." A new voice joined the channel a few minutes later, calm, unhurried, introducing himself simply as Daniel Cross, a regional coordinator. He answered our questions with a kind of patience that felt almost parental, as though he had done this exact conversation many times before with many different visitors. "Your scans are not wrong," he said, when Finch asked about the storms, the pressure, the corrosive air. "It is rough down here. Always has been. We just grew up with it." "How is that possible?" I asked, unable to stop myself. "Our models say a species cannot develop technology, let alone civilization, under those conditions." Daniel laughed, not unkindly. "Your models were built somewhere safer. Down here, kids learn to read the sky before they learn to read words. We build our homes low and strong. We share the land with things that would probably terrify you. We lost a lot of people getting this far. We are still here." Elena leaned toward the microphone. "The creatures in your seed ship's stasis pods. They appeared to have no natural defenses, no claws, no armor, no advantage that we could identify." "That is because our advantage was never really the claws," Daniel answered simply. "It was that we do not stop. Something bigger comes along, we build a wall. Ground turns against us, we build higher. We are not the strongest thing on this planet, not even close. We just refuse to leave." Martin, still shaken from the boarding, asked the question that had been sitting heavy in my own chest since the stasis pods. "Why did you stop sending ships out? Why did contact go silent?" "We did not stop," Daniel said. "We just have a lot of colonies, and this system was not exactly high priority. You would be surprised how many worse places we ended up settling. This one is actually one of the calmer ones." I felt something shift in my chest at those words, something between disbelief and a kind of quiet, growing awe. "Calmer," I repeated. "This world is rated the most dangerous survivability class our systems recognize." "Sure," Daniel said, and I could almost hear him shrug through the static. "You should see where our cousins ended up. Now that is a rough one." Finch asked to send a small team down for direct contact, expecting weeks of preparation, protective suits, careful planning. Daniel agreed immediately, almost too easily, and gave us coordinates for what he casually called a landing pad near a settlement. What we saw when our shuttle broke through the storm layer changed something in me permanently. Below us stretched a city built low against the wind, its buildings reinforced with thick-plated walls, glowing faintly against the dark, storm-heavy sky. Streets ran between structures shaped like shells, curved to survive falling debris. Children ran between buildings during a break in the weather, laughing, completely unafraid of a sky that our sensors listed as lethal. Near the edge of the settlement, Workers guided glowing streams of molten rock away from homes with tools that looked disturbingly ordinary, as though redirecting lava was simply part of a normal working day. Something enormous moved along the horizon, easily the size of a coalition dropship, and nobody so much as looked up from their work. Daniel met us at the landing pad himself, a tall man with tired eyes and an easy smile, wearing a jacket clearly built for weather that would tear coalition fabric apart in minutes. "Sorry about the mess," he said, gesturing at a nearby wall still being repaired after what looked like a recent storm. "We had a rough week." I stood there, staring at a city that should not exist, built by a species that should not survive, thriving on a world we had spent centuries writing off as empty. "How do you live like this?" I asked quietly. Daniel looked out at the horizon, at the enormous creature still pacing in the distance, at the glowing lava being calmly guided away from a row of homes, at the children still laughing under a darkening sky. "Same way anyone lives anywhere," he said. "You wake up, you take care of your people. You do not stop, no matter what the day throws at you." That night, back aboard the Quiet Ledger, I stood alone at the observation window, staring down at the storm-racked, radiation-striped, endlessly hostile surface of a planet the Coalition had feared for generations, without ever truly looking at it. It was no longer empty in my mind. It was full of light, full of noise, full of people who simply refused to be afraid of the place they called home. I closed my final log entry that night, with words I never expected to write. We came looking for a legend. We found a neighborhood,